They mocked her because she was small, because her shoes were too worn, because her hair wasn't brushed just right. They mocked the dog beside her too, because he limped, because he looked like he came from nowhere, because in a world obsessed with new, clean, and fast, he was old, quiet, and slow. But what they didn't know was that he had waited, for years, for someone worth protecting. This is not the story of a girl and her pet. It's the story of a soldier that never stopped standing guard, of a promise that outlived the man who made it, of silence that doesn't mean weakness, of stillness that doesn't mean fear. This is about what happens when cruelty forgets its place, and kindness remembers its strength. Because some battles don't begin with fists, some heroes don't need saving, and some legends come back when they are needed most. They mocked her, but 5 minutes later, they were on their knees. Her name was Mara, 10 years old, a quiet child, the kind who knew how to listen to wind through trees and how to fold sadness into drawings with no faces. She didn't speak much at school, not because she couldn't, but because most people didn't listen when she did. Every afternoon, she walked home alone. Except for Bear. Bear was a dog that looked like he'd walked through every bad day and come out the other side with all the answers, but chose not to speak them. He was massive, his black fur patched with gray, one ear torn, his right eye clouded from some injury long past. People who didn't know him crossed the street when they saw him coming, but those who knew nodded instead. He wasn't on a leash. He didn't need one. He followed Mara like a shadow, not because she called him, but because she didn't need to. People laughed. They called him a shaggy rug on legs, called her dog girl, said the animal was too slow to guard anything but the sidewalk. Some boys once tossed pebbles at him from across the schoolyard. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply stood still and stared. The pebbles stopped. The boys didn't try again. Because Bear wasn't just a dog. He was a memory made of muscle and silence. A story wrapped in fur. He had come into her life wrapped in a box of silence. Her father, a soldier, had returned from a mission with scars no one could see and a dog no one could name. The official files said the dog had been found curled around a fallen Marine, refusing to leave even under fire. No one knew how long he'd waited there. No one knew how he'd survived. But when they pulled the body from the rubble, Bear followed. He refused to go to a shelter. He refused to go to anyone. Until Mara's father walked up, knelt down, and whispered something into his ear. And Bear stood. From that day forward, he belonged to no one, but followed one. When her father died, Bear didn't cry. He didn't howl. He didn't whimper. He lay beneath the porch for 3 days. Then he stood up and waited at the front door, staring at Mara, and began walking her to school, without ever being asked. Mara's mother tried to send him away once, called the local shelter, said the dog needed more care than she could give. The truck came. 2 men approached with leashes and caution in their eyes. One got close enough to speak. Bear didn't growl. He didn't move. He just stared. The man turned to Mara's mom and said, "Ma'am, I don't think he wants to leave." And that was that. Now, every morning, Bear walked her to the school gate. He didn't come inside. He sat across the street, eyes on the doors. Teachers joked about the guardian of 6th Street. Kids whispered about the ghost dog who never blinked. Mara never explained. Because, how do you explain? A creature who didn't just protect your path, but belonged to your grief? One rainy Thursday, Mara stayed late for a school project. When she finally left the building, the world was gray, the sky barely holding its tears. The road home was longer than she remembered. The shortcut alley beckoned. She'd never used it before. Her mom told her not to, but she was tired, cold, hungry. She entered. Bear followed. They walked side by side, paws and sneakers echoing against wet brick and puddle-filled cracks. Steam hissed from a broken pipe. The light flickered above a dumpster tagged with names she didn't recognize. Halfway through, they saw them. 4 boys. Teenagers. Old enough to know better. Bored enough not to care. They stood in a loose cluster, tossing a coin between them. One wore a leather jacket too big for him. Another had a baseball bat. Not raised, just held. Casually. Like it was part of his hand. "Hey," one of them called. "You lost?" Mara kept walking. Bear didn't change pace. "Yo, girl," another shouted. "That your dog? Or did you steal it from a junkyard?" Laughter. Mara's steps slowed. They moved forward, one cut in front of her. "Where you headed? Princess of the Mutts?" Another circled behind. Bear stopped. The boys noticed. One grinned. "Look at that thing. Barely standing." Another reached for Mara's bag. "Don't," she whispered. He snorted. "Or what?" He grabbed the strap. Bear stepped forward, and the air changed. This is where the real story begins. This is where time slows. Where a dog with nothing to prove reminds the world what loyalty really looks like. And in 5 minutes, the alley will remember him. Forever. They saw her enter the alley. A shortcut she should never have taken. A crack between streets where the light didn't quite reach. Where things didn't get seen. Unless they were meant to be. The 4 boys had already claimed it as theirs. They smoked there, spat there, scrawled their names on brick walls like a signature no one asked for. Their laughter didn't sound like joy. It sounded like warning. And when they saw Mara, it changed. "Hey, dog girl," one shouted, tossing a bottle that skidded past her heel. She didn't flinch. But Bear did. His head turned slightly. Just enough. The boy with the cigarette blew smoke through his nose. "What's the matter, Mutt? You got one good eye or none?" The second boy flicked his knife open. Not at her. Not yet. Just at the air, the way some people talk with their hands. Mara walked, 1 foot, then the next. Bear followed. Calm. Heavy. "You deaf, girl? We said hey." One of them stepped in front of her. She looked up, briefly. "No leash?" he said, cocking his head toward Bear. "That's not legal." "I don't need one." That made them laugh. The boy with the knife raised his eyebrows. "Yeah? What do you need?" Mara didn't answer. The leader stepped forward. "Let's see what's in the bag." He reached. Bear moved. Not fast. Not wild. Just forward. He stood between them. And that's when something changed. Not in Bear. In them. Their jokes got quieter. Their stances less cocky. "What's it doing?" one whispered. The leader rolled his eyes. "Just a damn dog." Then Bear looked at him. Really looked. And that boy forgot how to breathe. Because there was nothing empty in Bear's gaze. It was full. Of places he'd never been. Of fires he'd never fought. Of deaths he'd never seen. But Bear had. All of them. A history made of blood, sand, orders whispered and obeyed. A war wrapped in fur. The one with the knife raised it. Just a twitch. Bear didn't snarl, didn't shift. He leaned in. And the boy dropped it. Metal on concrete. No one moved. Mara's breathing slowed. She placed her hand gently on Bear's shoulder. And for a moment, the boys saw something that didn't make sense. She wasn't hiding behind him. She was with him. Equal. He wasn't her guard dog. He was her echo. Her shield. Her proof that the past remembers the present. "You should leave," she said. Quietly. But it sounded louder than anything they'd heard in the alley. The leader blinked. He stepped back. The others followed. They didn't run. But they didn't speak, either. And they didn't look away until Bear let them. With a single blink. Mara walked forward. Bear walked beside her. And for the first time since they'd arrived, The alley felt clear. The shadows had pulled back. The echo of fear replaced by something older. Respect. Because what they saw that day wasn't just a girl and her dog. It was a vow kept long after the man who made it was gone. And, in 5 minutes, the world remembered who Bear really was. Not a pet. A protector. Not a memory. A message. The boys walked away that night, but the street didn't forget. Something about the way Bear had stood changed the air in that alley. And when the boys emerged back onto the main road, they weren't laughing anymore. They weren't even talking. But Mara wasn't thinking about them. Not anymore. She walked with Bear at her side, her hand resting on his back as if it had always belonged there. The rain had lightened to a mist, and the street lamps blinked back on one by one, like the city was finally waking up from a dream. When they turned the corner toward her street, she could feel it. The weight of what had just happened. Not fear. Not pride. Something older. Something heavier. She didn't speak of it when she got home. Her mother noticed the scuff on her bag, the way her daughter's shirt was pulled slightly off her shoulder. She noticed the silence too, but she didn't press. Bear lay down at his usual spot beside the front door, as if nothing had happened, but his eyes stayed open all night. The next day at school, Mara noticed something different. The boys weren't in the alley anymore. They weren't outside the convenience store either. Rumor had it one of them hadn't slept, that another one had woken up screaming. That one had quietly returned the knife to his older brother and said nothing at all. One girl claimed she passed them in the hall and they flinched when a door slammed. Another whispered that they had seen the dog again. Not beside Mara. Just watching. From across the street, or the edge of a field, or near the park gate. Always just standing. Silent. Unmoving. The boys stopped mocking people. Stopped skipping class. Started walking the long way home. And still, Bear said nothing. He didn't need to. For Mara, something inside had shifted. Before, she used to walk hunched forward, shoulders close, as if trying to make herself smaller. Now, she moved differently. Not louder, not bolder, but more rooted. Like her feet remembered they belonged to someone who had been protected. And that protection didn't disappear. It lived inside her now. She began sketching again. Drawing not just dogs, but shadows, stances. The shape Bear made when he stood between her and the world. She turned one of those sketches in for art class. Her teacher paused, stared, and said softly, "This feels like something ancient." Mara smiled. It was. Weeks passed. One afternoon a new boy tried to corner another student behind the school. He was bigger, louder, crueler. But before he could speak, he looked up and saw Mara, standing nearby. Silent. He froze. He didn't know why. But something in her stillness told him. Not today. He backed off. Didn't return. That night, Bear lay on the porch like always. Mara sat beside him, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her sketchbook on her lap. "You knew," she whispered. "Didn't you?" Bear blinked. Not just about them, but about me. He closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. 3 days later, one of the boys returned. Not with threats, not with a gang. Alone. He waited outside her school. Quiet. Nervous. When she walked past him, he called out, "Hey, wait." She turned. He looked smaller now. "I just wanted to say sorry." Mara didn't say anything. He swallowed. "That dog. He's not normal, is he?" She looked past him. Across the street, Bear stood, unmoving, watching. "No," she said. "He's better." The boy nodded. "I figured." He walked away. Didn't look back. Bear blinked once. That evening, Mara found an old box in the garage. Inside were photos her father had kept. Some from the army. Some torn. Others folded too many times. One photo stopped her. Her father, kneeling beside a massive black dog. Younger, less gray, but the same eyes. On the back, scribbled in her father's hand, "He doesn't bark. He doesn't run. But he always returns." She turned the photo over again, traced the outline of Bear's body, then pressed it to her chest, and wept. They never walked the alley again. Not because they may... afraid, but because they didn't need to. That place had already told its story. And in that story, a girl walked with something more powerful than fists. She walked with presence, with memory, with the ghost of a soldier who never left. And 5 minutes later, the world changed. The change didn't come like thunder. It came like a whisper through the cracks. The alley grew quiet in the weeks that followed. Not just because the boys never returned, but because even the air there began to feel like it remembered something. People passed through faster. A street musician who once played at the corner moved 3 blocks up. A dog walker turned around, without knowing why. Mara still passed it every day. She never looked afraid, but she never lingered. Some places aren't meant to be landmarks. Some are meant to be lessons. One morning, the principal called her into the office. She expected trouble. Instead, she found a woman in military fatigues sitting in the corner, hands folded tightly in her lap. "This is Captain Wren," the principal said. "She's with the Veterans K-9 Memorial Fund." Wren stood. "I was hoping I could speak to you. About your dog." Mara's heart skipped. "What about him?" "We believe Bear was one of ours. Years ago. We've been trying to find him." Mara hesitated. "He's not lost." Wren's voice softened. He isn't. That's the thing." She opened a folder. Inside, photos, scans, reports, deployment logs, and a name. Valor. She stayed silent as Wren explained it all. How Bear had once saved 3 soldiers from an ambush in Helmand. How he had gone missing after his handler, a man named Sergeant Vale, was killed. How no one had been able to find him. Until now. Wren slid over a final item, a medal, dulled with time. He was awarded this, posthumously. Mara stared at it. "I think," Wren said softly, "he was just waiting to give it to the right person." That evening, Mara sat beside Bear under the porch light. She didn't say much, just placed the medal on the ground between them. He didn't move, but she saw it, the tiniest flick of his tail. Just once. She smiled. 2 weeks later, Bear didn't rise from his bed. The vet came. She didn't bring machines, just her hands, her voice. Gentle truth. "It's time," she said. Mara held him through it all. She whispered things she didn't know she knew. About the alley. About her father. About never needing to be loud to be brave. When it was done, she didn't cry right away. She stood up. Took the photo of her father and Bear. Took the medal. Took the collar. And buried them beneath the tree behind the house. Just like that. A soldier laid to rest. People heard, of course. The alley got a new name, Valor's Way. Someone painted a mural there, not of a girl, of a dog. Black. Silent. Standing still. Years passed. Mara grew. Left town. Came back. Taught. Wrote. She never spoke of Bear in public, but those who knew her said she never walked anywhere with fear in her stride. And sometimes late at night when streets were quiet and the wind was just right, you could hear it. A single step behind you. Heavy. Certain. Protective. And then, nothing. Just the knowledge. That you were never really alone. Because some shadows don't follow. They stand. And wait. Until the world remembers. On the 10th anniversary of the day it all changed, Mara stood at the edge of Valor's Way. The mural had faded a little. Weather and time had softened its edges, but the black dog still stood tall on that wall, silent and unbending, just as he had been. Mara carried a folded paper in her hands. It was a letter she had never sent, written the week Bear passed, then rewritten over the years. It was filled with things she could never say aloud. Not to her mother, not to the world, not even to herself. She unfolded it slowly. The wind caught at the corners, as if trying to read it too. She whispered it instead. I kept walking, Bear. Just like you did. I taught kids who didn't believe they were worth protecting. I told stories that started with silence. I stayed when it got hard. I stood when I wanted to disappear. You didn't come into my life to save me. You came to remind me that I didn't need saving. I just needed someone to believe I was worth standing beside. She placed the letter beneath a brick at the foot of the wall. Not to be found. To stay. Some say that every now and then, in a different town, in another alley, another girl finds herself cornered. And when the world gets too loud, a shadow steps forward. Not barking, not biting, just standing. And the world quiets down. Because even though Bear is gone, the silence he taught the world to listen for never left.